Hi, now we've got part 2 of our philosophy series of 3, where we're going to focus on ethics. Same thing, we're going to try to just develop a lot of definitions and resources, do some workshops for you to start to get a solid foundation to go to that third part where we get into the design phase. All right, so first off, ethical standards. I think there's really 3 kinds of ethical standards, meaning there's high, there's low, or there's none at all. There's no in between anymore. I would argue that there are no secrets in sports with this day and age of social media. And I think that's why a lot of old administrators, particularly men, are struggling because we grew up in that environment of what was said in the locker room stays in the locker room. And that type of thinking just doesn't work, not part of our culture. So definition of ethical, Webster's Dictionary, conforming to accepted professional standards and conduct. Another one is we have an inherent ability to know the difference. Charlie Fisher, he was the quarterback coach here, Coach O'Brien's staff when he first came in, and was a quote he gave me when I did an interview I liked. Next thing to think about with ethics is your definition of sportsmanship versus gamesmanship. So pause the video here, and without looking at anything, what comes to your head first when you think of sportsmanship and what is gamesmanship? Write down those 2 right there. And then, is there a difference in that? The next one then go to define character. If we were doing this in groups or you did it with your team, you would come up with one team definition. And then last one, what is your ethics in sport? Don't spend a lot of time, just jot something down. There's no right or wrong, what's in your head. And then we're going to work on these to develop this in the direction you want it to become. So, after you've done the workshop here, sport ethics, again, one would say it's observing the rules, behaving according to the true spirit of the game, or the unwritten rules of the game. When we get into sportsmanship and gamesmanship, one way to look at sportsmanship is simply it's good character when participating in the sport, whether it's respect for the opponents, officials, teammates, coaches, or a lot of people would say just respect for the game itself. Gamesmanship is where you're violating the spirit of the game. This is that gray line, and again, you as a leader have to decide what is your ethical kind of border or crossing point here, because there is gray in this, but again, it's doing something to upset the psyche of your opponent in order to win. Each sport has a uniqueness to this, and I'm sure we can come up with plenty of examples. But where do you stand? What do you communicate to your team? Is it acceptable? Is it not acceptable? Remember again, if you don't take a position and address it, your players will go ahead and fill in the blanks, and then you're reacting to that. So be proactive. When we get into character versus personality, I'm sure you've all heard this, but character is who we are and what we stand for. I like that definition. It's the old personality is what you do when everyone is looking. Character is what you do when nobody's looking. Recruiting example, one of the things when I was a college coach and I was recruiting, you would meet young people and everything was going to be rosy and perfect. But I would always stop and talk to janitors, I would talk to teachers, I would talk to the office assistants. People that would see this individual when they thought they weren't looking and find out what kind of person they thought they were. And I found out later as I got in my head coaching career that ethical individuals and people with high standards and good people were probably more important than having a team full of just good talent. Obviously you need both, but if I had to pick at the end of the day, I was going to take people that were honest, trustworthy, and respectful, and hopefully they had some talent to help us be successful. When you get into values and definitions, value terms are very powerful. I would say these 2 are probably as important as any. Some great moral values we'll get to. Respect is showing regard for the worth of someone or something. Responsibility is then an extension of that respect. And you can see some different ideas here. Then principles of character are the moral values that tell us what we ought to do. So again, the 2 great moral values can kind of be your foundation is respect and responsibility. It promotes the good of the individual and the good of the whole community. Again, that team culture, that positive team culture. Responsibility focuses on the positive obligations to care again for each other. Again, focusing on the good of the team. When we get into teaching ethical conduct, the important thing to understand here is this isn't just inborn in us. You have to be taught what's right or wrong, research will show. And again, athletics provides an excellent opportunity for that. So again, when you start to talk about ethical conduct and ethics, tell me how you're going to do that and teach that to people. I'll give you an example. Is when we would do any type of running, it's classic. You start on a line and finish through a line, right? Sprints or something. And we talked about everybody creating self-discipline, and this gets into this empowering everyone to be part of the process versus the coach being the commander. Everyone knows this. You'll have a couple people that will be on the line or over the line because they're trying to win. It's about the idea of everyone having the self-discipline, or to help their teammates make sure that you're completely behind the line and creating that. So it's more of the sprint itself. It was about creating self-discipline within the organization. How do you teach ethics? Here's probably one of the best examples. If you're not familiar, John Wooden was UCLA basketball coach for 30-some years, won 11 national championships, and then developed this leadership model that is probably, along with Pat Summitt, the cornerstone of all coaches when it comes to ethics. So please pause the video at this time and watch this first video on Sports Century. It only goes about 6 minutes, but it gives you kind of the history lesson, and I've talked about the importance of understanding your history. And then there's an impact lesson where they're interviewing different players that played for him. And it gives you a great example of a research role model on leadership, where he uses the pyramid of success to actually as references and illustrations. If you're not sure what I'm talking about here, this is the pyramid of success, and it'll go through and through. You can look this up, but it's a great reference tool that you can use as a guide in your development. Another one, again, as I mentioned, Pat Summitt, who was the Tennessee women's basketball coach, who won, I believe, 10 national championships as a women's coach. Again, stop here. There's a great video, goes about 6 minutes, but she talks about what is the definite dozen. So pause, watch her video, take some notes of that. These are the definite dozen from Pat. The one that I like the best is make hard work your passion. But again, these are great ways of illustrating how you're going to instill ethics and leadership in your team. So at this time, we've done a lot of different resources. Hopefully you've watched the videos, so you've got some history lessons there, some great research. Let's take let's do a clinic here, pause, and look at the good and the bad, but what are some of the style and ethics? What are some good examples from Wooden, some good examples from Summitt? And from that, you can take and design your own code of ethics. It doesn't have to be the triangle or the definite dozen, but start to come up with a code of ethics. I like to use the standard of 3 because most people don't remember beyond 3. So if you can come up with 3 key points in your code of ethics, and then more importantly, start to work on your TRI, which is going to be required to get points in your assessment for each of your written assignments. Again, give me your definition of ethics. That would be your thesis statement, your own words. Then give a reference to support that, and then an illustration of how you're going to achieve or instill that within the group. All right. Again, we've talked about this thus far in class. Use all these different resources. Another great resource is you can go to Penn State, and it has a university ethics site to get some wording also. Another great example is in previous courses I've had students do ethic presentations or leadership role model presentation. This is one by Ryan Chikara and Trevor Loffer with a combined ethics and leadership. You can click on that, and it's a great PowerPoint in designing your own leadership and ethics philosophy. Quality research, creative kind of thesis they came up with, and then some concrete illustrations. Again, some good examples for you. As we go forward, a couple more examples. The Summitt Business School right here on campus has got some incredible ethical standards that they use. I love this wording: aspire to the highest ethical standards and hold each other accountable to them. And we intend to hold to this standard in our future careers as we move forward. It also talks about living up to, accountability, fair and ethical means, leaders of tomorrow, and then looking at the reputation of your organization. So Summitt Honor Code aspirations is another way to think about it. Some challenges you got as you design your ethics philosophy is that people come from a variety of backgrounds and different experiences and different viewpoints. That can be powerful if we understand and embrace that versus thinking there is only one way to do this. Again, gets back to being tolerant to individual differences and embracing those. Some examples again of that would be just socioeconomic background. People come from different financial means, different cultures, whether it's inner city, rural, so forth. Their family, those people, what kind of impacts and values they had on you with their coaches or leaders or organizations. So there's all sorts of different impacts, and they're all going to come together. A great example is when you come here to college from your first 18 years of life. Boy, it's really an incredible mixed bag, and hopefully you start to develop your own from this and gain some experiences from each other. Some things about competition. Again, it is a part of life, and winning at all costs becomes the sole purpose of athletic competition. It becomes tough. I'd pause here and watch this video of Pat Summitt, where she actually talks about being a leader. Again, gives you some insights on what I would argue as one of the most ethical leaders of our sport time, along with John Wood. Now, the ironic twist is Pat Summitt's son Tyler, because of her fame, was able to get into the coaching profession as a women's coach at a very young age, and went ahead and had an affair with one of his players, kind of disgracing his mom's legacy, and had to resign after this. So just because you do it, you believe in it, doesn't mean the followers are going to do it and live it. And her son's a great case of that. But again, we need to be able to start to lay a path so that everybody has an idea of the direction that things need to go in your culture and organization. That gets to the point here, though, you can learn a lot from as you do research about bad examples of ethics. So Tyler would be, we can learn from those interviews and those situations, which he talks about in some of his interviews, and obviously regrets. Another one that's classic is Lance Armstrong, American cyclist who finally admitted to doping throughout his career. So there's an interview there where he talks about it, and he talks about cheating. So again, watch both the good and the bad, and we can learn from both of those situations. So some ethics and coaching questions you need to address. What is leadership? You're going to have to come up with a very clear-cut definition and do TRI with that, give references after you give your own version, your own words, your own definition, and then look at illustrations of how you're going to accomplish that. You need to also come up with what ethics is in sport. Again, TRI is a must, but why is it important? How can you deal with it? And then when should you deal with it? Think about those things and talk about those in this TRI if you're still struggling with how to address some of these assignments. When we get to moral character, is the last piece when we talk about ethics. Define moral as related to principles of right and wrong, and also the capable of right and wrong action. When we look at character, it's the complex mental and ethical traits marking a person or a group. So if you weren't sure what those are, it gets into those. So another clinic, one more here. You want to think about these four things. How would you create, and this is kind of a how clinic now, how would you create a moral team environment? Come up with some ways, some concrete ways you can create that. How would you model moral behavior? Because again, your actions speak louder than your words. How can you teach some ethical decision making? It's as simple as holding people accountable to being truthful about their own actions, their own play, and so forth. And then how can you motivate your players to develop good moral character? What's going to motivate them to make those ethical decisions? Last thing I'll leave you with, again, is an example, because again, I get, just like leadership, what's your definition in ethics? Would be to live and lead using moral value system as a guide, a high moral value system as a guide. And I base it, again, on these three values. It's first on honesty. Another thing we used to talk about was full disclosure, just be fully honest. And that creates a fairness within your organization and people's values. That helps then develop trust, which I think is imperative for you to have any type of chance at working towards excellence. And that was just as simple as trust creates a belief in others. And then you can start to have fun. If you think about the 4 stages now, you're going to start to normalize and perform when you're having fun. And that's why you have to define this in your portfolio. And then last, you want to do that through respect, again, of individual differences. Another way to think of it is just the ability to forgive and look at and respect other people's differences. Again, this helps you then create that positive, nurturing team culture for everyone in your organization, not just the people that fit your style. Again, the reason this is important is you will be tested by something unforeseeable in the future. And how you've developed your team culture and your ethics and your definition of leadership in your team will help you endure the good times, but also the bad times. All right, good luck.